be here this evening. Glad you are able to join us by way of Facebook. If you would take your Bibles to turn to Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. The fifth book in the Old Testament. Those of you who don't know Deuteronomy chapter 6. So we dealt with the wives last week. We dealt with the husbands the week before. And now we're getting to the point where I really wanted to get to, because we could spend more time than just a half hour on husbands and wives and all of the implications that has. But we're going to get to the idea of parents and children. What does our homes, or what should our homes look like as Christians? Especially now that we have even more chaos in our country. What should our homes look like? What is our duties as parents towards our children? We should not be just content with feeding them physically, but we should be, well, I mean, some people struggle with that, but we should also want to feed them spiritually. It is a natural tendency. Why is this? Actually, let's ask this a question. Why is it a natural tendency for parents to only care about the physical well-being of children?
They can tell when they're getting skinny.
Tell when we're getting skinny.
In other words, it's just easier to see a physical decline than it is
Spiritual decline. Okay, so we're more apt to, we're visually oriented creatures, and so we can see whether someone is getting too small or too big, too tall or not growing at all. Anything else about why is it that we have?
Well, a lot of parents will decide to let them take care of that side. They will make their own decision. So, you know, I'm not going to.
So, as a parent, your decision about your children's well-being, spiritual well-being, is there.
Some people.
Some, yes, okay,
Yes.
some is up to the child
When they get old enough. Yeah.
when they get old enough.
Right.
And they definitely don't equate the physical growth with spiritual growth.
So we also have the idea of not equating physical growth and spiritual growth. Yes.
It's sometimes easier for parents not to have to deal with the spiritual side because it reflects ourselves and what we have to deal with personally.
Okay, so the idea of we don't want to deal with our own spiritual selves because of the poor examples we can and maybe are to our children.
Let's see. All right. So, as with many things among church folks, it's easier to let you do it.
Well, that's also let's let the pastor do it. They'll take care of the spiritual feeding of the children of the church. They take care of the spiritual feeding of my own personal expectations and so forth and so on. And that's a good point to be made. That a lot of times in church, we just allow the Sunday school teacher, allow the nursery worker, allow the pastor, the deacons, the elders to take care of the spiritual well-being of the children of my family.
Well, in the physical part of it, you have all kinds of help. It's all about the teachers. It's all about eating right, doing right, taking care of you, this and that and the other stuff. You have doctors' checkups and things like that, eye checks and ear checks and nose checks and everything. But you teachers don't have a real interest in whether or not you're spiritual or not. And so you're almost on your own. I mean, school teachers. I'm not
Right, no. You actually raise an interesting point, Kenny. We're so interested in the physical well-being that we'll take our children to doctor's appointments, their yearly checkups. We'll take our children to dentist appointments for their yearly checkups. They may have the cleaning, the x-rays, blood work done. Make sure that they're all healthy, mouth and body. But would it not be also okay for a spiritual leader of the church to do the same thing? For your children, to do a yearly checkup on your spiritual health?
I'm guilty. I was reading my prayer sheet, so someone may have said this. But I think as parents, till our children reach, say, Robin's age, to see that your kids go to church.
Right.
And whether they say, I don't want to or not, you're going to be in church and you're going to listen. And I think it's a parent's duty
Right.
to do that.
It's the parents' responsibility to do checkups on their own children's spiritual health.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Deuteronomy 6, verse 6 through 8. Deuteronomy 6, 6 through 8. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. Most people know this as the Shema. That's the first Hebrew word in Deuteronomy 6, 6 through 8 is the word Shema, the idea of listen, obey. So the Orthodox Jews would have their children learn Deuteronomy 6, 6 through 8 as you learn the Shema. Why should you learn the Shema? Thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up, and thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. You jump down to verse 19 to 20 in chapter 6 of Deuteronomy. To cast out all thine enemies from before thee, as the Lord hath spoken. And when thy son asketh thee in time to come, saying, What mean the testimonies and the statutes and the judgments which the Lord our God hath commanded you? So not only are you to teach your children, the nation of Israel, Moses is saying, teach your children, and do it often and repetitively, but you should be prepared to answer the questions that they have with regards to the commandments of God, the judgments of God, and the testimonies of God. As one of our authors have pointed out, we should catechize them about talking about our children, catechize them, mind them of the state of their souls, their need for Christ, the mercy of redemption, the excellency of holiness, and of everlasting life. It is they, parents, that are to watch over them with wisdom, love, and diligence, to save them from temptation, Satan, and sin, and to lead them by the example of a holy life. It is they that are to watch over them with wisdom, love, and diligence, to save them from temptation, Satan, and sin, and to lead them, again, by the example of a holy life. God uses means of grace within our lives to grow us. As an adult, what would be those means of grace? Some of them have been mentioned already, but as an adult, what are some things that God uses as a means of grace to grow you in your Christian life? All right, we have... Huh?
Trials.
Okay, trials and afflictions. All right, that's one. We kind of did a study on this probably 2.5 years ago now. What other things that causes you to grow as a Christian?
I think His Word.
Okay, His Word. So what do we need? I mean, we just can't look at it, Donna.
No, but you can study it.
Okay, so study His Word. All right, there we go. Study His Word. Anything else? We study the Word.
Practice it.
We practice the Word. Any other means of grace that God uses in our lives to grow us? Prayer. Memorization of Scripture. Witnessing. Like God uses all of these things, going to church. He uses these things to help grow us. But what is the thing in the child's life that God uses to help them grow in spiritually?
For example.
Parents. The number one thing for your child to grow spiritually is the parent's involvement in the child. He uses parents. So throughout their lives, parents are to remind the children of who God is, who Christ is, that they are under damnation because of their souls are filled with sin. And the list can go on and on and on. So as parents, learning from Moses and the nation of Israel, Deuteronomy chapter 6, we are to care for the child's soul by instructing them in the Word and will of God. So we take care of the child's soul by instructing them in the Word and the will of God. It is my responsibility for my children. It is your responsibility for your children. And may I even say grandparents. It is your responsibility for your grandchildren. To provide for the religious education of your child. And I'm not saying at this point that you need to have them in Christian education. That's a whole different ballgame. When I say religious education, teaching them things of the Lord. Okay? Philip Doddridge, he was a Puritan pastor. He preached 4 sermons on Proverbs 22:6. Anybody know Proverbs 22:6 off the top of their head? Child, yes, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he shall not depart from it. He refers to the home as the nurseries of the church. It's very interesting when you study the Puritans. One of the reasons they say that you need to be involved in the spiritual well-being of your children is because you birthed them into sin. God, there are great blessings from God that we have children in our lives. But because you're a sinner, they're a sinner. And if you don't believe me, you can watch my oldest. I can't not deny him as he's my child. And you shaking your head and he's your grandchild that way. So I blame you for some of his problems too. By the way, Facebook, that's my mother I'm pointing to.
Is that why the children blame the parents a lot of times?
Probably,
Yeah.
because I blame my parents, so my kids are going to blame me. That's just how we work in this family.
Passing the buck.
Yes, Pat, we learned it all the way from our forefathers, Adam and Eve. Yeah. Should we not, by being compassionate towards our children, want to help them because we have birthed them into sin? Should we not want to help them out of sin?
And you can start really young with them.
Yeah.
When I was in Herman, I taught a 2-year-old class. They asked me to take 1.5, and I said, that's way below me. And so I had them for a whole year, and I had 13 kids in that class by myself. And it's surprising how much they learned at 2 years old. And I know even with Aaliyah staying with us at 4.5, she accepted the Lord. With Papa.
You can start as early as you want with children, teaching them things of the Lord. There was a picture, not a picture, but a illustration given by the grandfather of Cotton Mather. His name is Richard Mather. He was a pastor here in New England, talking to the parents. And he was talking in particular to negligent parents when it comes to their children's souls. And he says, imagine, if you will, that your child comes to you in hell and confronts you about the negligence of how you parented on this earth. He goes on to say, as the child approaches the parent, the child would say, you should have restrained us from sin and corrected us. And you did not. You were the means of our original corruption and guiltiness. You were the cause for us being born into sin. and yet you never showed any competent care that we might be delivered from it. The child says, woe unto us that we had such carnal and careless parents. And woe unto you, parents, that had no more compassion and pity to prevent the everlasting misery of your own children. Philip Doddridge again saying the importance and magnifying the importance of children being taught the scriptures, and being taught in, they use the term Christian education, but in religious studies. There is nothing in which the comfort of families, the prosperity of nations, the salvation of souls, the interest of a Redeemer, and the glory of God is more apparently and intimately concerned. It is our responsibility to use the means that God has given us to see to it that God saves their soul. I will remind you, though, we cannot do the saving. Thankfully, that is not my responsibility. That is God and God alone responsibility to save my children. But that does not mean that I should be negligent in caring for their souls. Nor should you be negligent for caring for your own children and your grandchildren's and your great-grandchildren's and your nieces and nephews' own souls. We cannot be the one who generates grace in their lives, but God can use us as the instruments to bring grace into the lives of our children. The best legacy you as a parent can leave your children is that you teach them in the Word of God. We just read Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 through 8, one of the commandments that Moses gave the nation of Israel to teach their children. You can jump back to Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 9, and it says, only take heed to thyself and keep thy soul diligently, lest thou forget the things which thine eyes have seen, and lest they depart from thy heart all the days of thy life. But teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. So Moses is putting the onus on teaching your grandchildren as well. We've read Deuteronomy 6, 6 through 8. We won't read it again. But Deuteronomy chapter 11, 18 through 21. Therefore shall ye lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be as frontlets between your eyes. And ye shall teach them your children, speaking of them when thou sittest in thy house, and when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. Very similar to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 through 8. Verse 20, and thou shalt write them upon the door posts of thine house and upon thy gates, that your days may be multiplied in the days of your children, in the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers to give them, of the days of heaven upon the earth. 3 times in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses is instructed by God to tell the nation of Israel to teach their children about him, about his ways, his laws, his judgments, his precepts, his testimonies. God charges Abraham to teach Isaac the same thing. Genesis chapter 18, 17 through 19. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? For I know him that he will command his children, teach his children, and his household after him. And they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. Think about Timothy. Paul praises Timothy's mother and grandmother, does he not? 2 Timothy 1:5. When I called to remembrance, Paul writing to Timothy, when I called to remembrance the unfeigned faith that is in thee, the genuine faith that is in thee, the non-hypocritical faith that is in Timothy, which dwelt first in thy grandmother Lois and thy mother Eunice, and I am persuaded that in thee also. He goes into 1 Timothy 3:15 and says, "And that from a child that hast known the holy scriptures, which are able to make thee wise until salvation through faith which is in Christ Jesus." We're commanded in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, fathers, not to provoke our children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. The psalmist in Psalm 78, verses 4 through 6. "We will not hide them from their children, showing to the generation to come the praises of the Lord and his strength and his wonderful works that he hath done. For he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children." Proverbs 22:6, "Train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he shall not depart from it." Those are the commands of Scripture, whether Moses to the nation of Israel, whether God to Abraham, Paul to Timothy, Solomon using the wisdom literature in Proverbs. But just on the flip side, children are also to learn. Solomon again in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother." He goes on in Proverbs 6:20, and he says, "My son, keep thy father's commandment, and forsake not the law of thy mother." Proverbs 3:22, "So shall they be life unto thy soul, and grace to thy neck." Moving back to Deuteronomy. 21:18 through 20. Talking about what to do with a disobedient child. "If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him and bring him out unto the elders of his city and unto the gate of his place, and they shall say unto the elders of his city, This is our son, is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He's a glutton and a drunkard." Incidentally, this is about parents who are teaching their children, not that you've neglected your children and want somebody else to take care of your child. All of these verses we've read tonight gives us a solemn responsibility as parents and as grandparents and hopefully soon to be parents. One author likens young children as soft wax, easy to make an impression upon. He goes on to compare them like little twigs which may be bent in a desired direction. But when they are young, they are not bent towards stubbornness and a spirit of contradiction, as that will develop in later years. It's very interesting. Isn't that why Jesus says for us who are adults that we must come to the kingdom of heaven like little children? Mark 10:15, "Who verily I say unto you, whosoever shall not receive the kingdom of God as a little child, he shall not enter therein." I mean, you can think of Samuel and Hannah, 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 24. She taught him when Samuel was young before she brought him to the temple. And amazingly, he was more in tune with God than the high priest Eli was. The idea of tenderness isn't something that's foreign to Scripture. As Solomon says in Proverbs 4:3, "For I was my father's son, tender and only beloved in the sight of my mother." that children are to be trained is implied at a very young age in Proverbs 22:6. So we'll close with this quote this evening. I doubt not to affirm Richard Baxter talking about parents' access to their children at an early age. I doubt not to affirm that a godly education is God's first and ordinary appointed means for the begetting of actual faith and other graces in the children's behavior, of children of believers. The preaching of the word by public ministers is not the first ordinary means of grace. It is not my job. That is not my responsibility to be the first person that they hear about God from. That is you all's responsibility. It is my responsibility as a parent in my own home that they are to learn of God, and to learn about God is from me, not from the Sunday school teacher. Those are helps. The preaching of the word by public ministers is not the first ordinary means of grace to any but those on whom the first appointed means have been neglected or proved in vain. That is, it is but the second means to do that which was not done by the first. The proof is undeniable, he goes on to say, because God appointeth parents diligently to teach their children the doctrines of his holy word before they come to the public ministry, meaning before they come to church. Parents' teaching is the first teaching, and parents' teaching is the end, as well as public teaching, even to beget faith and love and holiness. And God appointed no means to be used by us on which we may not expect his blessing. Therefore, it is apparent that the ordinary appointed means of the first actual grace is parents' godly instruction and education of their children. And public preaching is appointed for the conversion of those only that have missed the blessing of the first appointed means. Therefore, if you deny your children religious education, you deny them the first appointed means of their actual faith and sanctification. And then the second cometh upon disadvantage. Again, we'll stop there this evening. Thank you by joining way of Facebook. Any questions, thoughts, comments this evening?